Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And we're back! And better than ever because we have more Conan, the Cimmerian, for you all. And Beyond the Black River continues with the action focus, and it really does feel like a Western. Honestly, not bad, but it feels a little melodramatic for some reason. In that regard, I'm not big on Chapter 4, if I'm being honest. That said, they soon see Zogar. The scene itself is pretty good. Basically, some of the men have been captured, because when Zogar gets angry, on page 449, it's interesting because the women and children flee to hide in the huts and are deathly afraid of him. So that we see that just how he rules through fear. But what's interesting is that these are the Picts. The Picts don't typically, they are the savage barbarians. They are the ones who are monstrous. Conan represents the good side of barbarians. The Picts represent the not so good. And in that regard, narratively, this is something that's been running through Howard's stories pretty well, at least in regards to the Hyborian Age. In the Thurian Age, the Picts were actually good barbarians. But it's just that over the millennia, they forgot their old customs and ways and became corrupted. I wonder how they became corrupted, if there's some external force or something within it that influenced them in that direction. Who knows, maybe Set got his revenge by corrupting them.
Maybe.
Having beset upon them a monster, which is described as being a little similar to a lion, but isn't. And Conan, of course, comes to the rescue. The heroes then escape Zogar Sag. It's mentioned that Jabal Sag had summoned up monsters in the past. Jabal Sag is someone else. The thing is, Zogar has simply taken the arts of Jabal Sag to a logical conclusion, so to speak. But on page 457 and 458, we get an interesting revelation that Zogar is brewing, yes, of course, war magic, but he's done something that no Pict has done thus far in Conan's living memory. He has united about 15 to 16 clans together and has banded together about 3,000 men under his banner. That is an impressive accomplishment when you consider that what the fort was probably hoping for was just 300 to 400 men. Instead, it's going to be 3,000 men. That's not a small group of hoodlums threatening the border. That's a full-on army. And what I think is also impressive is that Zogar has managed to hide these numbers for so long from, or at least that he's been gathering large numbers behind him for quite some time. So far, Zogar Sag is a pretty good villain in that regard. That said, Conan explains how he ended up slipping into the Pictish fort and managed to slip behind a guard and break his neck. That's how he managed to get by unnoticed. The guy was not paying proper attention, or so he explains on page 459. And, what is more is that Jebal seems to be a deity. Zogar Sag apparently wears ostrich plumes. And that's because the ostrich plumes are considered sacred. Now, they're worn in the East on the helmets of knights when they visit the barons of the marches. The ostrich feathers, which are traded by Stygians, who got them from Kush, which lies to the south of Stygia. Not many merchants are willing to trade with Picts because they're barbarians. So it goes without saying that'd be dangerous. And it's mentioned that Conan had fought alongside some pirates of the Isles of Barakan, and the Barakan Isles lie to the southwest of Singara, and that Conan knows the coast is dangerous, the coast of the Pictish lands. He used to raid them as a pirate, which can't be all bad if he's raiding the Picts. We are also introduced to, on 461, an interesting side to Conan, according to Balthus. As Balthus ends up analyzing Conan, what he explains is that the Cimmerian might have spent years among the great cities of the world. He might have walked with the rulers of civilization. He might even achieve his wild whim someday and rule as king of a civilized nation. Stranger things had happened, but he was no less a barbarian. He was concerned only with the naked fundamentals of life, the warm intricacies of small kindly things. The sentiments and delicious trivialities that make up so much of civilized men's lives were meaningless to him. A wolf was no less a wolf because a whim of fate caused him to run with the watchdogs. Bloodshed and violence and savagery were the natural elements of the life Conan knew. He could not and would never understand the little things that are so dear to civilized men and women. Yeah, I do agree with that to an extent. I also think that Conan runs into problems with civilized men because he doesn't work always in the way they want him to, because he can't. He's a barbarian, utterly and completely at his core.
He lived a different life than all the nobles over in court.
Yeah, and that's why they hate him, because he's not vain and venal. The only ones who might like him are the warrior aristocracy, who have more in common with him than they do the silk covered, ridiculous nobles who preen about at court. Conan himself explains that he has been many things: a mercenary captain, a corsair, a Cossack, a penniless vagabond, a general. And he says, I've been everything except a king, and I may be that before I die. The fancy pleased him. So right there, Conan thinks, I'll try grabbing a crown for myself. This is outright stating that one part of Conan's motivation was the desire for the throne himself. But we have to remember that though he wanted the crown for himself, he also wants it to better life in Aquilonia, because he has been in the front lines. He has been in the streets of Aquilonia. He knows what the problems are. He also knows what the solutions are, because he's seen the people, he's interacted with them. He knows what solutions they would prefer. In modern terms, he's more the blue-collar worker and war veteran than the white-collar person in the ivory tower. Now, I say that as someone who has mostly worked white-collar, and I have worked some blue-collar jobs. Franchement, you have a very different set of mentalities in both. It's important to distinguish them. His solutions are black and white, in that they work. Fundamentally, they work. Balthus and Conan end up, at the end of this chapter, engaging in battle against a group of Picts who snuck up upon them. Balthus struggles against some of them, only to gain the upper hand and kill a number of them, before Conan declares that they need to grab a bow and a handful of the enemy arrows, and they have to trust their heels again. And he complains that that yell was heard. They'll be here in no time. If we tried to swim it now, they'd feather us with arrows before we reached midstream. So obviously they can't take to the river. It now becomes a battle for survival. The thing is, though, we are not going to really get into the next 2 chapters quite yet. I thought that this story only had 5 chapters, but it actually has about 8 chapters. So we might have to tackle about 3 chapters in the next video, as I really wanted this video out and about in order for people to see we have not neglected Beyond the Black River. We've just had a lot of other stuff we've been doing, and I wanted to at least do a lore breakdown of the Cull video and explain some of the creative decisions and give insight into the creative process there, as I thought that was an important video to make. The Riddle of Steel video had been planned for a bit of time, and as I was out of the country at the time, it was the perfect video to just drop, because it didn't really require too much or any editing and whatnot, whereas these sort of videos do require some editing and some work. What thoughts do you have on these 2 chapters?
I'm still enjoying, yes, it's the Western thing, but I'm enjoying the outside perspective of Conan, actually a grunt, who is essentially this sheriff's sidekick.
I'm actually enjoying that part of this story as well.
Because as much as we see things from Valeria's perspective, Bailiff's perspective in other stories, we don't see much male sidekick's perspective on Conan.
Yeah, we also see the villain's perspectives on Conan. Various other characters' perspectives, but never this. Conan rarely ever has a male sidekick, and we don't really see their point of views. This was a pretty darn good idea. To an extent, it's not exactly my cup of tea. This is not my favorite Conan story. I'm liking a lot of the ideas, and I am liking the wording and how it's giving us a different insight into Conan. In that regard, I would say that this story is invaluable. It's not one I'm really, really enjoying. I'm liking some things and some ideas, but I have mixed feelings about it. But that said, would I recommend it? Yeah, I think it is necessary reading in order to build up to the Conan the Liberator story. You do need to read these sort of stories in order to build up to his seizing the crown, as that is an integral part of the Hyborian Age and Howard's overall mythology. Hopefully, next time we'll have the next Beyond the Black River video ready soon. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, as though you were Conan and Zenobia out on their honeymoon, smashing their enemies to itty-bitty pieces.